Oh, I know that sound. It's time for the Beer and News Report. Hi, and welcome to the Beer and News Report. Cheers. Every now and then, you come across a beer and you say, I wonder what that tastes like. I've got to try it. Well, that's the beer I'm having today. It's called Taco Truck Lager. Right? Taco Truck. I thought, does it maybe have a taco flavor or is it spicy? But no, it tastes like a regular ordinary lager beer, which I like. So this beer gets a thumbs up from me. I will say though, I brought it to a party and everyone just looked at the label and said, what the heck kind of beer is that? And so I became the point of conversation. So if you're going to a party and you want to be the point of conversation, I highly recommend this beer, right? Cheers. Okay, it's the holiday season and you're out there shopping. Do you ever wonder if the product you're buying was made in a sweatshop? Yeah, me neither. But I came across this great YouTube lecture by Professor Benjamin Powell from Suffolk University called Sweatshop Wages in World Workers. Are the wages worth the sweat? He totally blew my mind away because he proves that sweatshops are good and it's basically part of how an underdeveloped country becomes more developed. I know it sounds hard to believe, but kick off your Nikes that were made in Bangladesh, grab a beer, and let's talk about sweatshops. Cheers. Now, I have a link to the lecture in the comments below, but here's Professor Powell giving the lecture I got the material from. He comes across as an easygoing guy that likes to drink beer, so right away, we had a connection. Before I get into his speech, let's have a flashback to the days when celebrities were being called out for using sweatshops to make their products. Kathy Lee Gifford was one of the first celebrities to get attacked. Her clothing line, called Kathy Lee, was found to be using 13 and 14-year-old Honduran girls to manufacture her clothes, as reported by the New York Times. Kathy quickly shut down those operations and found another place to make her clothes. But it turns out that that was a Salvadorian factory which made women work 11-hour shifts 6 days a week in sweltering conditions for a meager wage of 60 cents an hour, and that was according to E! News. But you don't even have to have a clothing line, as Jennifer Love Hewitt found out. She was promoting Hanes brand underwear when an anti-sweatshop activist called her out. They said that since she was a celebrity, she could bring attention to these sweatshop factories. Other celebrities have been attacked. The latest is the Kardashian family with their shoe dazzle or their collection lines. Also, Sean P. Diddy Combs was attacked for his line of clothing called Sean Jeans. So obviously, if you're becoming a movie or TV star and you're thinking of opening up a line of clothing, you might want to watch the rest of this show. Cheers. The first thing we have to do is define what a sweatshop is. It is not forced labor or slavery. Sweatshops are factories that people choose to work in that have poor health and safety conditions. These are usually in low-wage third world countries. Now, why would anyone choose to work in these conditions? Because the alternatives are even worse. Okay, here's your choices. You choose. 1, you work in a sweatshop making clothes. 2, you're a subsistence farmer or you're working in the fields. 3, you're chopping down trees hoping to make money off the wood. And 4, you're begging in the streets or you're starving. Those are your choices. I'll give you a chance to think about it. Cheers. Alright, the answer is obviously number 1. The other 3 stink. But I can hear some of you saying, well, I'd rather work outdoors than be cooped up inside in a hot building. And that's because you live in America. American life is so nice that I've had people come up to me saying they couldn't do my job because they can't stand to work indoors all the time. Okay, now this was before COVID, and I had to show up for work to do my job, so working from home really wasn't an option. Now, what was I doing? I was working as a recruiter for high-tech companies, and that means I had top-of-the-line equipment, working in an air-conditioned building with an ergonomic chair so I could work for hours and still be comfortable, free soda and snacks, and if the food wasn't free, then it was subsidized to be cheaper than going to a restaurant. You don't want to work inside to get that? I don't know. I can't figure you out. I think we're spoiled when it comes to working in America, but in a developing country, they don't have the amenities that the U.S. has. So when an employer asks you, would you like to make clothes working at 60 cents an hour in the factory? You look at your options. Inside is a hot room making clothes for 60 cents an hour. Or farming around my house, most likely eating what I grow and hoping it's enough to survive. Or grabbing an old dull axe, going down and chopping trees, then cutting them up, carrying them to the market, and hoping someone will buy them so I have money to eat. Or I just give up and starve and beg on the streets hoping people give me some of their money. It's obvious you're going to take that sweatshop job. and the conditions suck and the work is hard, but it's so much better than all the other options. And that's what Professor Benjamin Powell talks about, right? Yeah, cheers. Now, this doesn't mean that once you use a sweatshop to make your product, you can sit back and relax, leaving the managers there to run the factory. You have to check up on them once in a while to make sure the managers haven't gotten too greedy and gone into an abusive mode, because that's what happened at Apple. If you remember back in 2010 in Shenzhen, China, Apple outsourced the manufacturing of its iPhones to Foxconn at their Longhua plant. Now, Shenzhen is like the Silicon Valley of China. It's very high tech. It turns out that workers were being pushed so hard they would go to the top of the building and jump off. For them, it was better to die than to live the life that they had. There were 18 reported suicide attempts and 14 confirmed deaths. 20 more workers were talked down from the Foxconn officials. This is an example of when a sweatshop turns into a slave labor shop. This can happen anywhere when greed takes over the ethical management. Apple went to that facility, worked with the management and the government, and corrected things. Foxconn hired counselors, worked with management to ease the tensions with the workers, and then installed nets around the building to catch any would-be suicide jumpers. So now, when a Foxconn worker wants to commit suicide, he jumps off the building, bounces back off the net, lands back at the top, and just says to his boss, no, I was just getting some fresh air. I'm going to go back to work now. Cheers. Now, according to Professor Powell, this is a phase that the undeveloped countries go through on their way to becoming a developed country. What happens is the workers are in sweatshops. They're called the rich workers. They're getting paid better than anyone else there in that country. Their children don't have to go to work because they make enough money to feed them, house them, and send them to school. What you need to understand is what are the sweatshops paying in comparison to the national average wage. This chart shows the wages that sweatshops pay in percentage of the national average wage. The bottom of this axis shows the country, and to the left of the axis is the percentage. As you can see, some countries like Honduras and Nicaragua pay almost 700% the national average wage. Just for clarification, the 4 bars on the chart from left to right are when you're working 40 hours, 50 hours, 60 hours, and 70 hours a week. The 40 hours a week is just a reference, as almost no developing country works 40 hours a week. It's more just to compare to the United States or another developed country. Actually, I heard that the 40-hour work week might get shortened to 30 hours in developed countries. Well, heck, I guess I retired too early, huh? Yeah, cheers. Now, 700% of the national average. Now, let's take America. The average wage in America is about $40,000. So 7 times that is $280,000. Now, sure, you have to work 70 hours a week to get all that, but ask anyone out there who's got 2 jobs. They're probably already doing that, and they're not making $280,000 a year. Now, if you're making that kind of money, what do? Well, buying food is a no-brainer. Heck, I'll go to Whole Foods and shop there. And same with clothes. No more Target for me. I'm moving up to the Gap. But what else do you buy? Well, now you can afford a car. You can buy a house. You can get furniture, a TV, computer, stereo, a fridge, washer and dryer. You start buying all these comforts of home. What does that do to the economy? Well, the economy goes up. That's what drives underdeveloped countries into more developed countries. For example, after World War II, Japan was in shambles, but they had a cheap workforce and they made cheap products. They were the China of the olden days. Japan went through that sweatshop phase and is now a developed country. The same thing happened with South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and now China is going through it. But China is starting to get priced out. It's getting harder and harder for them to produce the really cheap stuff. That's all being moved to the Southeast Asia and Latin American countries. Don't get me wrong. They still produce a ton of stuff, and unloading all that manufacturing is going to take a long, long time, but it's starting to happen. That's the price you pay when you want to become a developed country from being an undeveloped country, right? Yeah, cheers. So when you go to the stores to buy Nike shoes or Victoria's Secret lingerie or any of the other stores that have been called out for using sweatshops, remember, for the most part, sweatshops are good. They give people jobs that keeps them from starving. That's how a country builds its infrastructure so it can become a developed country. It's just going to take time to solve. For instance, the war ended in Japan in the 1940s, but they didn't really become a developed country until the 1980s. So it takes decades for a country to build itself up. In the meantime, developed countries will use all those factors to build products at a cost that Americans will pay and still make a profit. But take a note from Apple. You have to keep an eye on your factories. Otherwise, things will get out of control. And then you show up in the news. And that's not good for business. Right? Yeah. Well, as you can see, my beer is almost empty, and that means we're at the end of the show. If you want to contact me, you can use this address. I hope that you had a good time watching the show. And I hope you feel a little more at ease from what you bought when you were shopping these holidays, or what you're about to buy when you shop at these holidays. If you like the show, please click that like button. Of course, if you want to get notified of new shows, you click that subscribe button and then the little bell icon next to it. This will notify you when I posted a new show. Now, I'm going to take Thanksgiving to New Year's off, and you go home and relax too. And remember, keep your beer cold and your interests hot. Cheers.